Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope that you're having a good week so far. Um, I was actually, right before I hopped on here, I was looking at my Anchor app, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, the Anchor app is the app that I use to record my audio only part of the podcast. And I'd actually hit 1.7 thousand downloads or listens, views, whatever you'd like to refer to them as. And I was actually just, I don't know, I just got really proud of myself um, because even though some of the episodes that I record don't necessarily get as many listens as other ones do, and then sometimes I'll start to wonder, maybe did I talk about something that wasn't that important? What do I need to do to make it to where more people listen and get the same amount of listens each time? And the more I thought about it, it kind of bothered me at first. And I happened to be watching a YouTube video, and they were talking about how, like, when you make videos, that sometimes you can let the fact that maybe some don't do as well as others, and you let it get to you and bother you, but that you shouldn't, because as long as you like what you're doing, as long as you enjoy doing it, it doesn't matter if people don't necessarily like it as much as some of your other stuff. Just do it anyway because it's for you. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, that for me really is true, because this isn't a money thing for me. This isn't, I'm not trying to make money. I have a job. So this was more about just doing something to get involved, try to help make a difference, and fight to not have things change too much, and to just kind of spread awareness and expose things for, if they're lies, or expose the truth about things. That's really all this is about. So even though that doesn't sound like a lot, I mean, to me, that's a lot, because just starting out and having no experience doing it, and just, I don't know, I was just really proud. And to anybody else out there that is making a podcast, and it doesn't matter what it's about, it doesn't have to be political, it can be anything. If you feel like you're not doing well enough, and you are discouraged because maybe you're not doing as good as you were when you first started out, don't let it get you down. Just keep doing it. If you enjoy it, just keep doing it. And I just kind of wanted to share that, because I know I talked to a lot of people. I've met a lot of people through starting this that also have podcasts, and some of them do really well, and some are just starting out. So I just wanted to kind of spread that message to all my fellow podcasters that are not in this as a career, but more as, I wouldn't say it's a hobby. I don't really know what you would call it, but just a little positive message to spread. Okay, first thing that I want to talk about today, this I saw on Twitter. I think Elijah Schaefer tweeted about it, and of course, I'm not surprised. And then the Daily Wire also did an article on it. Um, but Tucker Carlson had said on his show that he was being spied on by the NSA. And um, apparently, there's a story that he's working on. I'll read the article, but apparently, there's a story that he was working on, and there was a whistleblower in the NSA that repeated back to him what the story was. And Carlson claims that there's no way anybody would know about that except from his own emails or texts. The only thing I can think to that is, who was he emailing and who was he texting? And is it possible that whoever he was in communication with about this story would have said something to somebody. That's the only way you could say, well, maybe it wasn't. But I don't put it past anybody under the Biden administration to do anything like this. So, this is from The Hill. This is written by Celine Castro Nuovo. It says Fox News host Tucker Carlson on Monday alleged that the Biden administration was spying on him in an effort to take the show off the air. The television personality said that the war on terror is now being waged against American citizens. And we can see that for ourselves, right? We don't have to be hearing this from Tucker Carlson. We see the corruptness in this administration. The host went on to say that his show had heard from a whistleblower from within the U.S. government who informed Carlson and producers that the National Security Agency is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. Now that's a shocking claim, and ordinarily we'd be skeptical of it, Carlson told viewers. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could have only come directly from my text and emails, he added. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The host then argued that the NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. Carlson said his show had sent a Freedom of Information Act request related to an alleged information gathered by the NSA and other agencies on his show. The television personality offered no additional evidence to support his claim, which drew scrutiny from several users on social media. I'm not really sure what kind of evidence they want him to provide because he's not going to leak the whistleblower's name. There's a reason why they're whistleblowers and you don't tell people who they are, especially if you want to continue getting information. Bradley P. Moss tweeted out, Tucker is making serious accusations with no proof and is basing corroboration on a story he allegedly is working on that none of us know about. Maybe his comms were picked up. We know DOJ collected comms of journos during Obama and Trump presidencies. Um, well, why are we supposed to know what the story is about? When they're working on a story, you don't know about it until they air the story. Um, Brian J. Is that Karam? He tweeted, Tucker, the NSA isn't spying on you. Also, the FBI wasn't behind the insurrection. Critical race theory will not result in genocide, but you will say literally anything to get attention. You're a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity. Oh, come on. You stop quoting Buzz Lightyear, idiots. Um, Farewell. But talking about being spied on, and just has to bring up everything. Actually, yeah, I do believe the FBI was involved in the Capitol protest. I do believe that, and I don't think that critical race theory. And I know I'm going kind of off, but I'm just kind of answering this guy's moronic statements. I don't think critical race theory will result in genocide. I don't think that. I think it will result in a lot more division and hate among the races, and it's going to trickle down on top of our children, and we're going to start seeing children hating each other when we shouldn't allow people to fill our children full of hate. Um, but I have to say, Tucker Carlson, he's probably one of my favorites on Fox News, and there's not very many good journalists left. So The Hill has reached out to the NSA for comment. NSA refutes Tucker Carlson's spying allegations, and Tucker Carlson doubles down on NSA spy claim after agency denial, which we're going to talk about. Carlson's comments came in a segment that began by discussing remarks from President Biden that top law enforcement officials have identified white supremacy as one of the greatest threats in the U.S. Carlson said he spoke to FBI agents who reportedly told him there are very few crimes committed by avowed white supremacists. Americans are, in fact, much more likely to die from a lightning strike than at the hands of a white supremacist, Carlson argued. White supremacy may be ugly, many opinions are, but it is not a meaningful threat to the nation. And it's not. It's not. I I don't know where they're getting that. In fact, if you look at statistics, which is where you should get your information, there are more black on Asian crime and black on black crime, and there's not a whole lot of white on whatever other race you want to in put into that sentence. There's not. And typically when you look at statistics, especially when it comes to like um I think it's homicide. Don't quote me, but I think it's homicide. And typically those crimes, they are not, they're is it intraracial? Typically white people commit crimes against white people and blacks against blacks. And that's kind of how it works. Those are how most crimes work, and you stay within the confines of your race. But then you do have the ones that commit crimes against other races. And it's not because of their race that they're doing it. It's just that's the person that they chose to commit a crime against. But I think I'm going to have to agree with Matt Walsh on the title of hate crime. I don't really feel like there should be a hate crime category, um, because when you think about it and you just get down to the bottom of it, all crime is hateful, especially violent crime. So really, I think every crime is a hate crime when you think about it. Like when you get actually technical, it's all hate crime. I'm not so sure you should get charged or given a harsher sentence because it's racially motivated. I feel like you should just be getting a sentence just for the act, because it's not against the law to dislike somebody for their race, their looks, their gender. You can't discriminate like in the workplace and under the law, but as a personal opinion, it's not illegal to have those opinions. So I don't know how you're getting charged and given a sentence because you're expressing your freedom of speech. I'm not saying it's right because it's not. It's just the point that you have that right to feel that way. Anyway, so the NSA responded to um, the claims, and the reactions, there were numerous reactions, and the Daily Wire said that it's either poorly drafted or something worse. So let's see what this says. It says the National Security Agency's response to allegations that it is spying on Fox News host Tucker Carlson sparked a wide range of responses on Tuesday night, with most people falling into one of two camps. Either they noted the carefully crafted way that the statement was constructed, or they used the statement to claim that Carlson was lying. Before getting to the responses, the following is a brief timeline of the events that transpired. What Carlson claimed at the start of the week. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we're working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. This morning, we filed a FOIA request asking for all information that the NSA and other agencies have gathered about this show. The NSA responded by publicly releasing a statement the moment that Carlson's show aired on Tuesday night that claimed, on June 28, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try to take his program off the air. NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States. With limited exceptions, as in an emergency, NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. I mean, we understand how the law works, but that doesn't mean that they follow the law, so that's the weird part. Carlson responded to the NSA statement by stating in part, tonight's statement from the NSA does not deny that. Instead, it comes with this non sequitur in part quote. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency. Okay, glad to know. But the question remains, did the Biden administration read my personal emails? That's the question that we asked directly to NSA officials when we spoke to them about 20 minutes ago in a very heated conversation. Did you read my emails? And again, they refused to say, again and again. And then they refused even to explain why they couldn't answer that simple question. We can't tell you, and we won't tell you why we can't tell you. My emails, and the message is clear. We can do whatever we want. We can read your personal text. We can read your personal emails. We can send veiled threats your way to brush you back if we don't like your politics. We can do anything. The following are a few of the top responses that conveyed skepticism to the NSA's statement. Richard Grenell tweeted out, read each sentence carefully. Okay, let's read each sentence carefully. On June 28, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try to take his program off the air. Okay. The NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States, with limited exceptions, an emergency. And could this be considered an emergency? The NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. Have they gotten a court order? I wonder. Glenn Greenwald tweeted out, first, it's bizarre that the NSA allowed no replies. Second, NSA has used the same deceit for years. They can spy on U.S. citizens' communications without targeting the American. Oh, that's what they meant by reading carefully. They're not targeting Tucker Carlson, but they are still reading his stuff. Third, NSA has extremely broad authorities to collect communications without targeting a person. Andrew Kloster tweeted, Tucker isn't the target, only incidental to the target. The NSA doesn't currently have plans to shut down his show. The Tucker quote is two allegations, but NSA denies it as one, the Mott and Bailey technique. This statement is consistent with Tucker being monitored. I don't know if this is coming from people who kind of know what they're talking about. They have familiarity with the NSA. I don't know. Brian Dean Wright tweeted, word games here from the NSA. Read Tucker Carlson's spying claims. The NSA can and does collect against people who are not targets, using the guise of incidental collection. This is not a credible denial of Tucker's claims. Defund the secret police. This attempted denial is a disgrace, as anyone who has a brain and can read clearly knows. America's government intel agencies are corrupt, dishonest trash. That was Sean Davis. Hans Monick. I don't know how you say that. This is either poorly drafted or something worse. Two distinct allegations does not equal this allegation. Monitoring does not equal intelligence target. Attempt to take this show off the air doesn't equal plans to try. Whether it's poorly drafted or something worse, it's more late stage Rome stuff. Ezra Levant, why have you disabled replies to your tweet? P.S. If someone is willing to spy on you, they're probably willing to lie to you too. Yeah. Conrad Black, this is more or less what James Clapper said when he lied under oath to Congress in 2013. Abhinav Agarwal, Still won't say if the NSA monitors his electronic communication or not. The language of the denial would do Sir Humphrey proud. One, can one be a target, though not an intelligence target? And two, no, the NSA may not want to take his program off the air. Others may, though. The following are people who either mocked Carlson or called him a liar in response to that statement. Philip Bump tweeted, "When you're losing credibility battles with the NSA." David Frum tweeted, "Now comes the part where Fox News produces the evidence, right?" Dean Obadala said, "This is where we are as a nation, where the NSA literally had to put out a statement denying Tucker Carlson's allegations. All this will do is elevate the Tucker conspiracy theory. Why didn't they just ignore this bigot? Because then they'd look even more guilty." Denver Riggleman, of course, correct. Tucker lied. Believes that Lord of the Rings is a documentary and or knows money is on the flip by peddling conspiratorial crap to an audience who thinks it's chocolate pudding. Nick Way, so this is a thing that's happened. Curious what the budget for tinfoil is right now in the halls of Fox News. You notice how they always say that people on the right are tinfoil hat wearing idiots? Except everything we say, it eventually gets proven to be correct. Kudos to whichever comms director got them to eliminate the phrase stupid piece of crap from his statement. Richard Jeter, Tucker Carlson has either A, been caught again disseminating fake news, B, admitted that he is a foreign asset, C, been advised he is not important enough for the deep state to care about. I'm sure he'll be big mad and make that stupid constipated baby face about it, though. Richie Torres tweeted, "Breaking news. Tucker Carlson is a conspiracy theorist." John Schindler, "Oh look, Tucker Carlson and Fox News are completely full of crap, just like I told you. NSA almost never does this. This is super rare. It's not the usual, can neither confirm nor deny. This is a flat denial. Show us your whistleblower, Tucker." Okay, I'm not going to continue reading all these. Oh, Eric Swalwell, though. Let's read his. Settle down, Tucker. I mean, people just are, I don't know if the left like knows that this stuff it happens or if they're just completely oblivious to the fact that the side of the government that they stand with like break laws and do not care. I'm just saying, I'm not sure if they're really aware of that. However, God, I did not intend to spend 20 minutes talking about, well, more like 17 minutes talking about this. So let's move on. That's what's going on with that. Okay. Now, here in Texas, the Texas Supreme Court just ruled that Facebook can be sued for sex trafficking. Apparently, Facebook is the platform that's used the most to find and groom girls for sex trafficking. I mean, who'd have thought, right? This is from jurist.org, and this was written by Heidi Johnson. It says, "The Texas Supreme Court ruled Friday that federal law does not grant Facebook immunity against lawsuits for users who use its platform to lure minors into sex trafficking. Three plaintiffs filed separate suits against Facebook, alleging that they became victims of sex trafficking after meeting their abusers through Facebook or Instagram, which Facebook owns. In addition to several negligence claims, the plaintiffs asserted claims under a Texas statute that allows civil lawsuits against those who intentionally or knowingly benefit from participation in a sex trafficking venture." Excuse me. Facebook moved to dismiss all claims against it, contending that they were barred by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which protects interactive computer service providers such as Facebook from being held liable for any information provided by its users. However, the Texas Supreme Court denied Facebook's motion, saying that Section 230 does not, quote, "create a lawless no man's land on the internet," end quote. The court further explained that Section 230 protects internet platforms from being held accountable for their users' words or actions, but, quote, Holding internet platforms accountable for their own misdeeds is quite another thing. Thus, the court held that Section 230 did not bar the plaintiff's statutory claims against Facebook. All three plaintiffs were minors at the time they were lured into a life of trafficking after being groomed by Facebook or Instagram users. One plaintiff's mother reported the Instagram sex trafficking activities to Facebook, but Facebook did not respond. Shocker. Annie McAdams, who represented the plaintiffs, said, "My team is humbled by this order and for the opportunity to work for our clients. Our clients fought over 2 years for the right to even bring their case." So we do not understand Section 230 to create. Okay, we just read that. That was from Justice James Blacklock, who authored the court's opinion. Holding internet platforms accountable for the words or actions of their users is one thing, and the federal precedent uniformly dictates that Section 230 does not allow it. Holding internet platforms accountable for their own misdeeds is quite another thing. The victims have argued that Facebook provided an unrestricted platform for criminals to lure children into the sex trade, according to a press release from their lawyers. The big tech platform is not only the first point of contact between many sex traffickers and their victims, but it gives criminal operations apparent credibility, their lawsuits alleged. They further accuse Facebook of violating Texas state law that criminalizes knowingly benefiting from sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is abhorrent and not allowed on Facebook, a Facebook spokesperson told the Daily Caller News Foundation in a statement. "We will continue our fight against the spread of this content and the predators who engage in it." Well, if you're too busy fact checking and locking people out of Facebook and, um, you know, fighting against your political opposition, you're not going to be able to keep up with this kind of stuff. The spokesperson added that the company is reviewing the decision and mulling potential next steps. God, he's such a scary looking man. "Our clients have fought for over 2 years for the chance to bring their case," Annie McAdams, one of the lawyers representing the sex trafficking victims, said in a statement Friday. "While we have a long road ahead, we are grateful that the Texas Supreme Court will allow these courageous trafficking survivors to have their day in court against Facebook. We believe trafficking survivors in Texas can expose and hold accountable businesses such as Facebook that benefit from these crimes of exploitation," McAdams said. But Tech Freedom, a think tank that focuses on technology issues, condemned the court's ruling Friday. The group accused the court of misinterpreting federal communications statutes. This decision, based on a tortured and unwarranted reading of the law, undermines that overreaching goal, Tech Freedom Free Speech Counsel Ari Cohn said in a statement. State courts must not ignore the unambiguous text of the law in order to reach a preferred outcome based on what they think the law should be. Section 230, a provision of the Federal Communication Decency Act of 1996, protects online platforms. Yep, we know what it does. But more than 45 million photos documenting child sexual abuse were posted on popular social media platforms in 2018, according to a 2019 New York Times report. In addition, advocacy groups have warned that sex slavery runs rampant on Facebook. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, though, said that his company works harder than any of its competitors to root out child exploitation during a 2019 House hearing. Zuckerberg also stated that he was committed to working with law enforcement to further crack down on people who use Facebook to commit crimes. But I'm glad that they ruled on that because sex trafficking is a huge deal, and the fact that Facebook benefits from it. I'm not saying they're complicit. I'm not saying they are actively trafficking girls, but they are benefiting. They get the benefits of people using the platform, and they they shouldn't, and they should be held liable. I absolutely agree with that, and that's my opinion on it. There's a story that I saw on the Daily Wire that I wanted to look at. Um, I just thought it was an interesting story. It caught my attention. And this was written by the Daily Wire by Sharif Khan. In 1982, one Georgia town required everyone to own a gun. And here's what happened. This is why I wanted to read it. I was curious. So, In the wake of recent tragedies, the tired refrain from the left to ban gun ownership has reared its dogmatic head for the umpteenth time. It seems the legacy media and the left can find no other solution to curb crime and violence. Instead, they can only stamp their feet and demand a massive redaction or outright abolishment of the Second Amendment with little to no regard for facts or objective reality. Lost in all the hysterics and sophistry is just how effective a deterrent legal gun ownership is against crime. Though often buried by the left, countless studies and data point to this being decidedly true. In fact, here's how an unusual city ordinance passed in a suburb outside of Atlanta, Georgia, proved just that. The Kennesaw City Ordinance. While Kennesaw, Georgia has grown quite a bit with the addition of Kennesaw State University, in 1982 it was a relatively quiet suburb of Atlanta with a population of about 5,000. At the time, Kennesaw City Council decided to pass an ordinance requiring all heads of households to possess a firearm at home. It began as a somewhat symbolic effort to protest the outright ban on handgun ownership in Morton Grove, Illinois. This new ordinance, however, would lead to startling results in crime reduction. Professor Gary Kleck, a lauded criminologist and professor emeritus at Florida State University, detailed the outcome of the city ordinance in a 1988 study for the academic journal Social Problems that included an 89% decrease in burglaries. Finally, the deterrent effect of civilian gun ownership is supported by the experience of Kennesaw, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta with a 1980 population of 5,095. To demonstrate their disapproval of a ban on handgun ownership passed in Morton Grove, Illinois, the Kennesaw City Council passed a city ordinance requiring heads of households to keep at least one firearm in their homes. In the 7 months following passage of the ordinance, March 15, 1982 to October 31st, 1982, there were only 5 reported residential burglaries compared to 45 in the same period in the previous year, an 89% decrease. This drop was far in excess of the modest 10.4% decrease in the burglary rate experienced by Georgia as a whole from 1981 to 1982, the 6.8% decrease for South Atlantic states, the 9.6% decrease for the United States, and the 7.1% decrease for cities under 10,000 population. Of course, this is just one of the many examples Clark provides in his innumerable studies on the subject of legal gun ownership as a highly effective deterrent against crime. In the same study, Clark noted that subway robberies decreased by 43% in New York City after an armed citizen used a handgun to wound 4 robbers. Clark was quick to point out that there may have been some correlative value to that finding due to an additional increase in police presence. Still, such transparency and academic rigor only bolster his comprehensive research. Elsewhere in the study, Kleck details how in 1967 the Orlando Police Department trained some 2,500 women in the use of firearms after a spike in sexual assaults. As a result, incidences of rape plummeted by 89% in Orlando, while, quote, the rape rate remained constant in the rest of Florida and in the United States, end quote. Not only did training a large number of women in the proper use of firearms act as a massive deterrent against sexual assault, Kleck noted that it prevented other criminal activity as well, pointing out that it also led to a substantial drop in burglaries throughout the city. Kleck's tireless research going back decades alongside Kennesaw's unusual but effective city ordinance demonstrates time and again that a civilian population trained in the proper use of firearms serves as an effective deterrent against violence and crime. A deeper dive into gun ownership and crime prevention. Far from being some antiquated study, Kleck's findings on the Kennesaw City Ordinance are as true today as ever. Unfortunately, such details are often buried, hidden, or simply discarded by the legacy media in their dogged efforts to ban firearms. Writing for the Foundation for Economic Education, Lawrence W. Reed argues that, quote, liberty isn't the only thing likely to be lost when gun laws are passed to appease emotions over reason, end quote. Reed then asks in the exhausting decades long debate, how many lives are actually saved by gun ownership? A compelling question the grandstanders and ideologues on the left refuse to acknowledge or answer. He offers some noteworthy facts which, at the very least, foster an actual discussion on the many merits of gun ownership. Guns prevent an estimated 2.5 million crimes a year, or 6,849 every day. Most often, the gun is never fired and no blood, including the criminals, is shed. Every year, 400,000 life threatening violent crimes are prevented using firearms. 60% of convicted felons admit that they avoided committing crimes when they knew the victim was armed. 40% of convicted felons admitted that they avoided committing crimes when they thought the victim might be armed. Felons report that they avoid entering houses where people are at home because they fear being shot. Fewer than 1% of firearms are used in the commission of a crime. The Heritage Foundation also provides an extensive database of Americans who successfully defended their liberties, lives, or livelihoods with the lawful use of a firearm. The database is reinforced by the findings of the CDC and provides conclusive evidence contrary to all the hubris and hoodwinking of anti gun crusaders. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Heritage Foundation continues almost every major study on defensive gun use has found that Americans use their firearms defensively between 500,000 and 3 million times each year. There's good reason to believe that most defensive gun uses are never reported to law enforcement, much less picked up by local or national media outlets. It highlights just a fraction of the incredible number of times Americans relied on the Second Amendment, not the government getting there in time, to protect their inalienable rights. Despite the limitations on data, these confirmed cases of defensive gun use help prove that the good guy with the gun is not a myth, but an integral part of American society. Finally, Amy Swearer of the Daily Signal gives a wise summation of legal gun ownership after providing an extensive list of Americans who successfully defended themselves with a firearm in 1 month alone. The exercise of Second Amendment rights in defense of self or others is not a rare or extraordinary event, but a daily occurrence in the lives of ordinary Americans doing ordinary things. What about the constant specter of mass shootings? Charles C.W. Cook's brilliant 2018 essay for the National Review, written in the wake of the El Paso shootings, is proving to be a persistent piece on the pressing issue of mass shootings and gun control. To be sure, Cook is quick to denounce the El Paso shooter as a young white supremacist man compelled by an abhorrent villainous ideology. Cook, however, adamantly refuses to cede to the overtures from the left that such horrific events serve as an indictment against the United States as a whole, and by extension, the Second Amendment. Now as ever, Cook writes, the quality of a free society is measured by how that society protects its liberties when they have been abused, not by how well it celebrates them when they are under no strain. What happened in El Paso was an unconscionable disgrace, and when we have finished reflecting upon it, we should exert great effort in considering how we might prevent its like from happening again. But if we turn against our key strengths in the process, we will achieve a Pyrrhic victory at best, and at worst end up dismantling our inheritance for a mess of pottage. Cook also cites the findings of the Rand Corporation, whose relevant academic research failed to find a single gun control policy that has been proven to reduce mass shootings in the United States at the time. As heinous and frightening as mass shootings are, they do not contribute in any statistically significant way to the supposed data on gun violence. It's the staggering and tragic spectacle of such macabre events that provide fodder to the many irrational arguments put forth by the detractors of the Second Amendment. In 2018, UC Davis Health reported that mass shootings contributed to only 0.2% of total firearm deaths. More importantly, firearm related homicides are far below the peak that occurred almost 50 years ago in 1974, according to the Pew Research Center. On a paper, oh, not on a paper, on a per capita basis, there were 12 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 2017, the highest rate in more than 2 decades, but still well below the 16.3 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 1974, the highest rate in the CDC's online database. Sadly, suicides dominate the majority of firearm deaths, indicating once again far deeper and malignant issues in our nation that so many refuse to consider or acknowledge. Yeah, that's another thing about the gun statistics. is those numbers include suicides. And that shouldn't be included in that because that's not gun violence. So I don't know why they include that in there. Well, I mean, I do know why. They're trying to pad the numbers. That something as simple as a city ordinance requiring gun ownership could dramatically cause the crime rate to plummet should be evidence enough on the merits of firearms as a deterrent. Yet, the fatiguing dogmatic refrains opposed to the Second Amendment continue to drown out common sense, let alone actual data and evidence. As this shrill chorus continues to grow, one can't help but conclude that many on the left stand in opposition to the very idea of America itself. Um, yeah, I would say so. Now, I really would like to look up what this word means because I don't know. A metrical foot having two short or unaccented syllables of or characterized by perix. An ancient Grecian warlike dance in quick and light measure accompanied by the flute. Um, okay. It's of a victory, won at too great a cost to be of use by the victor. Okay, sure. Anyway, I just thought that that story was really interesting. Um, you know, it's just we know that guns work. They do. And we really should keep fighting to not lose our rights to own guns. But staying on the topic of guns, um, there are 7 false claims that Biden has made about guns, and we're going to fact check those really quickly. This was written by Ben Johnson. So, is it true that gun shows don't require background checks? Most people don't know. If you walk into a store and you buy a gun, you have a background check. But you go to a gun show, you can buy whatever you want and no background check, Biden said on April 8th. But Biden shouldn't know this either because it's false. Federal law requires any gun seller who holds a federal firearm license to conduct a background check on the would-be buyer before completing the purchase, regardless of where the sale takes place. That includes gun shows. Private individuals may sell firearms to people who live in their own state without a background check, but FFL holders may also facilitate private sales by performing background checks if one of the parties requests it. A survey funded by a gun control organization found that nearly 80% of all gun sales in the previous year included a background check. Aside from federal mandates, 16 states and the District of Columbia require background checks on all firearm sales as of this writing, according to Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. What is the truth about the Charleston loophole? Biden cited another frequent gun ownership myth on April 8, according to the White House transcript, the so-called Charleston loophole. If the FBI hasn't come didn't complete the background check within 3 days, there's a process. If wasn't done in 3 days, according to Charleston loophole, you get to buy the gun. The Charleston shooter bought the gun and killed a heck of a lot of innocent people. Under federal law, FBI background checks must be completed within 3 days. If they are not, the seller may proceed with the sale. But the Charleston church shooter procured a weapon despite the fact that he had been listed erroneously as a felony drug user, something not uncovered for months after the purchase. Rather than exposing the incompetence of the federal bureaucracy, gun control advocates say this proves the federal government should be given more authority over law-abiding citizens' self-defense choices. And rather than tell federal employees to speed the process up, a proposal from Representative James Clyburn would extend the period to 10 days. Oh, that's wonderful. In reality, the background check would likely not have prevented the purchase of the firearm used in the Charleston shooting because the shooter had been charged with a misdemeanor, not a felony. Whether drug possession would have been enough to keep a gun out of his hands is legally ambiguous. Biden also ignores that a sale does not end the federal government's jurisdiction over firearms. If the federal government finds an applicant violated its background criteria after the 3-day window, the ATF can issue a retrieval order authorizing federal agents to stop the sale or remove the firearm from its owner's home. The ATF issued 4,000 gun retrieval orders in 2016 alone. Agents successfully retrieved approximately 93% of all firearms involved in such transactions. Do gun manufacturers have absolute immunity from lawsuits? In 2020, candidate Biden sought to contrast himself with the surging campaign of Senator Bernie Sanders by highlighting Sanders' one-time pro-gun voting record. During a Democratic presidential primary debate last February 25th, Biden said Sanders and others have in fact also gave in to the gun manufacturers' absolute immunity. Imagine if I stood here and said we give immunity to drug companies, we give immunity to tobacco companies. That has caused carnage on our streets. The firearms industries did not have absolute immunity from all lawsuits. Biden referred to Sanders' yay vote on the 2005 Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which prevents lawyers from filing ludicrous nuisance lawsuits against the gun manufacturer or seller because their product was used illegally in a shooting. But the PLCAA still allows firearm companies to be sued for 6 infractions. If an injury occurred due to a defective product, for instance, Sig Sauer has been sued multiple times over injuries caused by an allegedly defective trigger in the P320 handgun. 2. If the seller or manufacturer is guilty of a breach of warranty or contract. 3. If an FFL holder knowingly broke the law by selling a firearm to someone not legally allowed to own one. 4. If a seller or manufacturer negligently entrusted a firearm she or he knows is likely to be used in a crime. 5. If a gun dealer or a manufacturer broke truth in advertising laws or knowingly marketed firearms to someone not legally permitted to possess them. Or 6. If a gun dealer or manufacturer broke existing gun laws, specifically the 1968 Gun Control Act and the 1934 National Firearms Act. So they don't have complete immunity. Obviously, they can be sued for stuff. But the fact that Biden wants to allow people to sue the manufacturer or the gun seller because someone who legally purchased a gun turned around and used it to kill somebody, they want to say, yep, we're going to sue them because you sold a gun to someone who used it in a crime, like they are, um, psychic and can know who's going to use what gun for what that's purchased legally. Federal lawmakers have conferred limited immunity on industries besides firearm manufacturers. For instance, social media platforms like Twitter cannot be sued for material posts on their platform thanks to protections contained in Section 230. See? So there you go. Do red flag laws reduce suicide? Again on April 8th, Biden said states that have red flag laws have seen a reduction in the number of suicides in their states. God, I have allergies. So-called red flag laws, technically known as extreme risk protection orders, allow law enforcement officers to remove firearms from people who legally possess them if officials deem them a risk to themselves or others. But do they work? So far, the answer is unclear and inconclusive, according to a 2020 study from the RAND Corporation. Although RAND deemed the results of Indiana's red flag laws suggestive of a possible suicide reduction, the authors concluded, we find inconclusive evidence for the effect of extreme risk protection orders on total and firearm suicides. Were there 150 million gun deaths in 13 years? In 2020, then candidate Biden inflated the number of gun-related deaths to unimaginable levels. Immediately after claiming that Bernie Sanders caused carnage on our streets, Biden specified that 150 million people have been killed since 2007, when Bernie voted to exempt gun manufacturers from liability. That would be nearly half of all Americans, a true American carnage. His campaign later clarified that he meant 150,000 deaths, which is roughly in line with the number of firearms homicides collected by the CDC. Since assuming office, that number has continued to rise. Through the first 5 months of 2021, gunfire killed more than 8,100 people in the United States, about 54 lives lost per day, according to a Washington Post analysis. That's 14 more deaths per day than the average toll during the same period of a previous 6 years. Can you own a machine gun? In a February 2020 campaign stop, candidate Biden told the crowd, "You can't own a machine gun, no matter how much money you have. Under the Constitution, politicians can limit the kinds of weapons that are able to be owned. You actually can own a machine gun to this day, but it takes a lot of work. According to the ATF, private citizens may own an automatic weapon if the machine gun was lawfully registered and possessed before May 19, 1986, and the individual meets all the conditions, stipulations in Form 4, including being a legal U.S. citizen with a clean criminal record who is not addicted to any illegal drugs, including marijuana. The background check takes an estimated 9 to 12 months. It requires a $200 tax, which Biden would like to apply to semi-automatic rifles and magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. It will not be approved if a state or local law prohibit ownership of a machine gun, and a used machine gun typically sells for $10,000 or more. Machine guns covered by the 1934 National Firearms Act have never been used in a mass shooting in America, noted the Guns in America Project, an initiative of multiple taxpayer funded public media stations. Okay, see, that's news to me. This is something I didn't know. I did not know that if you registered and possessed lawfully before May 19th, 1986, you still get to keep that machine gun. That's yours to keep. You cannot get one any longer. But apparently, up until that time, you could purchase a machine gun if you could pass all of this stuff and you also had $10,000. I honestly didn't know that. Okay, well, probably because, I'd just been born right before that. A few weeks. Okay. Has the Second Amendment always regulated who can own guns and limited the kinds of weapons they can own? The Second Amendment, from the day it was passed, limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon, said former Vice President Joe Biden on June 23rd. This is both true and false. It's false that the Second Amendment forbade private citizens from owning a cannon or any other kind of weapon. The first federal gun control law came with the 1934 National Firearms Act, which restricted, regulated, and registered certain classes of firearms and accessories. Private citizens could and did indeed own cannons in the Revolutionary era. On the other hand, many laws have limited the type of people who could own a gun, particularly black Americans, whether free or slave, and American Indians. It's unclear that this is a legacy former Vice President Biden or Kamala Harris wish to make their own. So there's some of the gun laws that they don't know anything about. And, we'll just check them. Um, just if you're probably wondering, and I know some people do wonder this, how is the Biden administration fact checking your Facebook feed? Well, Ben Johnson wrote an article letting us know exactly how it's happening. So let's just look. The Biden admin has launched an aggressive online effort to convince social media forums like Facebook to fact check and remove posts that the government or the Democratic Party believes constitute fake news, according to Politico. The multi pronged effort includes at least three separate teams of paid left wing activists who scour the internet looking for misinformation, which they classify as unintentional falsehoods, and disinformation, which they consider deliberate lies. They then insist that the offending post be reviewed or taken down. In other words, if you have encountered a fact check on a story that did not seem controversial, it may have been instigated by the Biden administration and paid for with your tax dollars. Politico revealed that the White House's taxpayer funded Office of Digital Strategy, the Democratic National Committee's Counter Disinformation Program, and a private group called Building Back Together have assumed different roles in monitoring and determining what content is consumed on social media. But this sounds like stinking China. Politico did not explain when it became the Biden admin's place to determine what content social media users may consume, but it delineated some of the ways these three organizations have squeezed online platforms and detailed some of their misguided definitions of misinformation. The White House employs at least 2 dozen people to monitor and, if needed, combat disinformation, including encouraging different sites to fact check false content, reported Natasha Kurecki for Politico. The Office of Digital Strategy is led by 12 Democratic operatives handpicked by Biden, according to The Hill. This is so. This is like CCP here in America. The White House operation spends its days not fending off falsehoods, but ensuring a steady stream of factual and positive information flows onto social media platforms, according to Politico. The director of the White House unit, Rob Flattery, said his people concentrate on sharing our messages into places where there is a lot of disinformation, such as the channels that those folks who are in those audiences trust, presumably the social media accounts of conservative leaning websites and news outlets. At the same time, Biden linked groups try to get social media websites to pare back any claim it deems erroneous. Building Back Together, an advocacy group closely aligned with Biden, has assumed the role of battling social media outfits, including Facebook, on behalf of the White House, Politico noted. BBT has badgered Facebook to police online posts that contain information the Biden administration considers false. Earlier this month, the leader of BBT's voting rights efforts, Robert Bauer, publicly pressured Facebook to crack down on any allegation that the 2020 presidential election may have had any defects in execution. He instructed Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to launch a comprehensive review of Facebook's potential contribution to the narrative of electoral fraud and the exacerbated tensions that culminated in the violence in the United States on January 6th. Or lack of violence, rather. Unless Facebook engages in the transparent evaluation and review that Bauer and BBT demand, it will have discredited its own review board, wrote Bauer in a letter dated June 2nd. The DNC expects the fight to regulate, bury, or delete online content to be so important that it's mainstreamed its disinformation program directly into its communications department ahead of the 2022 midterm elections. The reason why becomes clearer when you understand the DNC's definition of conspiracy theory. Korecki reported that one of the conspiracy theories Democrats condemn is that Dr. Anthony Fauci has been less than forthcoming about COVID 19's origins and mitigation efforts. Conservatives on social media for more than a year had undertaken efforts to discredit Fauci, Korecki wrote. Increasingly, those efforts had relied on exaggerations, misrepresentations, and outright conspiracies, which have moved from the fringes to a presidential forum. She did not mention Fauci's undeniable record of self contradictions and public fibs. The DNC cited the fact that a reporter had the temerity to ask former Vice President, I gotta start saying that properly, former Vice President Biden, whether he still had confidence in Fauci as triumph of disinformation. That a mainstream reporter is raising that question is the result of a successful smear campaign, said Timothy Durrigan, the lead analyst of the DNC's counter disinformation program. Other stories that Durrigan consider conspiracy theories include critical race theory, the idea that allowing biological males to compete against biological females will destroy women's sports, and allegedly spliced video making the president seem like he's struggling to speak. Come on. We've watched that live. No one's splicing it to make it look like he can't talk. He actually can't. The strategy of the federal government to directly counter conspiracy theories stretches back at least to the Obama administration regulatory czar Cass Sunstein, who co-authored a controversial 2008 paper with Adrian Vermeule. They advised the federal government to cognitively infiltrate groups teaching conspiracy theories, including chat rooms, online social networks, or even real space groups. They also suggested paying independent appearing journalists to tell the government story, something prohibited by federal law. The reason conspiracy theories resonate so much is precisely that people have learned, rationally, to distrust government actions and statements, wrote journalist Glenn Greenwald in 2014. Sunsten's proposed covert propaganda scheme is a perfect illustration of why that is. How much worse is a group of paid White House employees who spend their time scrolling through social media pages and pressuring online platforms to do their censorious bidding for them? Yeah, I agree. Like, and this is why all my stuff is fact checked, because there's some bum sitting in the White House scrolling through everything, and we are paying, our money is being used to pay these people to keep us quiet. So we're paying to censor ourselves, basically. Basically, yeah. That's exactly what it is. I hate what our government's become. I really do. I don't know what we're gonna do. I just every day it just seems like something so outrageous is brought out into the light, and it's like you want to be in shocked, but you're not, because like, duh. I It drives me nuts. I intended to do another story, but I can't. Um, that that story really ticked me off. I'll cover the next one, and probably tomorrow or Monday. It's not super important, but I'm done. I feel like I'm living in China. Last time I checked, that's not where I lived. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed spending some time with me today. Learned some new stuff. I know I learned some new stuff, especially about guns, things that I wasn't aware of at all. Completely educated on that today. So I hope that you will maybe go check out my Facebook. I just got to say something, Lauren Collins. You can send me an email. You can ask me a question. Tell me a story you'd like me to talk about at gotta say something 21 at gmail.com. You can find the audio only podcast on Anchor, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, a lot of other different platforms, and go to my YouTube channel. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, share the video, tell others about it. I would really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And also, please go check out the Scott Ford Show. Isaac Hayes at The Cajun Conservative and his Christian podcast, Brothers Just Searching. My friend Christy at The Lennar Score and Christy's Closet with a K on YouTube. And TV's Rob is Unwoke. They're great people. We're just trying to help each other out and get each other noticed. And that's all we can do is just spread the truth and hope that people listen and help spread it as well. Anyway, have a good rest of your day, and I will see you back tomorrow. God bless.